So we're here today with Steve. Steve, thanks for being the first client of mine to raise your hand and agree to put yourself through this interview process with the client relationship Launchpad. The goal is to tell your story, share it with other people, to effectively get your word out, let people know who you are, what you do, and why they should reach out to you for referrals. What's your secret sauce? What's your superpower? And what can they learn if they're closer to you in your world? So what I'd love to start with is just the Reader's Digest version of who is Steve? Where are you from? How'd you get here?
Yeah, it's funny. Good thing I'm a little bit older. I know what Reader's Digest is.
That's true. I really should X that in my language, right? Yeah. The abbreviated, the 30-second, 2-minute version of who you are.
The elevator pitch. All right. So my name is Steven Padernacht. I am a real estate broker here in the Bronx. I service New York and New Jersey. I recently got my New Jersey license during the pandemic because a lot of my buyers and sellers were leaving New York and going to New Jersey. I've been in the business for about 15 years. I am also a real estate investor. I manage properties, so I have a lot of I kind of wear a lot of different hats, and I have a lot of experience in different aspects of real estate, which helps me with my clients because when I'm helping them buy or sell their home, I'm not just looking at it through the lens of trying to make a commission or as a salesperson. I'm able to help them look at it what renovations might be done, what the value might be in 5 to 10 years, a lot of different things that they normally wouldn't be looking at, and your average agent probably doesn't have the experience to talk about.
The depth of knowledge.
Yes, the depth of knowledge, yes. And it only comes through experience. Like, that's really where it comes from.
Time on task, right? Like Gary Keller says, if you want to be a master of anything, you've got to commit to giving it 10,000 hours of your life. All right.
Yep,
so
yep,
how'd you end up in real estate?
That's a great question. I ended up in real estate. I'm actually third gen in my family to work in the real estate field. My grandfather was a superintendent. Well, he started off as an artist. He was a musician. He was a jazz musician. He also was a painter, and he was not making a lot of money. And this is going back into like I guess my dad was born in 48, so we're talking like the mid 1940s. He was at a barber shop, and there was a very wealthy man there that was getting a shave, and he couldn't find somebody to paint his house. This big multi-mansion, this big multi-million-dollar house for this wealthy guy. So my grandfather raises his hand and says, "I could paint your house." He hires my grandfather. My grandfather did such a great job that the guy said to him, "Well, listen, I'm buying a property in the Bronx. This is in Brooklyn, by the way, where the barbershop is. I'm buying a property in the Bronx. It's 250 units. I need a superintendent. Would you be willing to relocate to the Bronx?" My grandfather was just a handy guy. He never really had any experience doing this. So he was like, "Yeah, okay, it sounds like a great opportunity." My grandfather was a superintendent from 1948 up until about 1975 when he retired. My dad at that point had two different options. He could mold himself after my grandfather, who was a blue-collar worker, or my Uncle Bill, who actually was the wealthy landlord that my grandfather met. They built such a close relationship. My dad modeled himself after Uncle Bill, and he decided to get into the white-collar aspect of becoming a salesperson. My father was a salesperson. He never actually was licensed. Don't tell anybody, but he was never actually licensed.
You mean they don't follow all the rules in New York? I'm shocked.
Well, this is going back in the 80s and 90s. It wasn't so strict.
It was the Wild West, as a matter of fact. I remember.
Yeah. And my father didn't really my dad didn't do residential real estate. He did commercial real estate. He helped people buy and sell apartment buildings, and he did commercial loans, and he managed 30, 40, 50, 60 unit apartment buildings. So growing up as a kid in that household, I have two older brothers. I'm the youngest of three. You can only imagine that there was a lot of talk about real estate and a lot of talk about, this has to be fixed, that has to be fixed. Oh, what's the value of this building? Oh, so on and so forth. So when I graduated college, my dad gave me two options. He said, you can go out and work in your area of expertise, which at the time was public relations, or I could teach you how to never depend on another person for a check for the rest of your life. The caveat was that he was going to pay me the same wage I would have made in my field at the time for 1 year. After that 1 year, I was on my own, and he would never give me another paycheck. And true to his word, I never got another paycheck after that 1 year. And in that year, I got my real estate salesperson's license. A year later, I got my broker's license, and I've been in real estate ever since.
Wow. So how did you end up at KW?
KW kind of found me. A buddy of mine, his name is Seth. He introduced me to a gentleman by the name of Jamal, who had recently just left Weichert and started his own market center. The market center was about 15 minutes away from my house in Westchester County in Scarsdale. And I had a meeting with him only because I was tired of doing things on my own. I was really frustrated with people coming to me and saying, Steven, I want to do real estate. I want to do real estate. And I would bring them on and I would try to create this system and create this plan and create my morning meetings and all this stuff. But at that time, the internet wasn't as, there wasn't so much information out there on how to do this stuff. So I was kind of like winging it. And when I met Jamal, he introduced me to the systems. He introduced me to the Red Book. He introduced me to all the different opportunities that were here at KW. And I said, well, this is a match made in heaven. I said, I'd be happy to join. And the rest is kind of history.
So how long have you been here?
I started with KW, if it's 2023, I'd say probably 27, I'd say probably about 13 years on and off. And the reason I say on and off is because after that first meeting with Jamal, I stayed with KW for about 4 years, but then I left for about 4 years. And I said, screw this. I don't need the systems. Yeah, they're great, but I learned enough. I learned enough. I've read that darn book 100 times. I could do it on my own. I went out, I did it on my own, and I failed. And I said, I called Jamal. I said, listen, would you be willing to take me back? I want to come back. And he said, absolutely. And that was in 2019. So this second run, and this is ultimately going to be my last run with KW, because I don't plan on ever leaving, has been 4 years.
Wow. What's the biggest lesson that you learned, or the thing that you came away from that experience, those 4 years that you were not at KW? What's the overarching theme of that time in your head? Like, how do you remind yourself you're not ever going back there?
I think there's a couple of things, but the main thing that sticks out to me is that you need a support system. As independent as I think I am, and as much of an entrepreneur that I think I am, as much of a hustler and all these different things, you need a support system. You need a staff. You need something that's in place already. And why recreate the wheel? I was right back in the same position where I was trying to, figure out what do I do with my buyers? What is it? How do I set up an Egypt campaign? I'm trying all these different things out, and I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? I'm just going to go back. A big thing for me was always like the percentage, right? Like paying that company dollar. And I look and I said to myself, I'm going to do that right away. I'm going to cap anyway. So what am I even worried about? Opening my own office is going to cost me more money than it is for me paying company dollar. Why am I going to, so the one thing that sticks out to me is you need a support system and don't recreate the wheel.
Yeah,
so
I love it. All right.
And being around like-minded individuals also. There's something about being in a sales office where your name is up on the wall and they have the top 10 people who are, that competition really drives me. So when you are the biggest fish in a small pond, it kind of gets to your head a little bit, as opposed to being, not the biggest fish and you're in a larger pond and you start learning that I got to get to the top of my market center. And then from the top of my market center, I got to get to the top of my region. And then from the top of my region, I got to get to the top, so you're always reaching for something better. And that really pushes me as well.
I love that. So who's the client that you serve?
I serve, I like to say I serve everybody, but I really don't think that that's 100% accurate, if I'm being honest. I have a very specific personality. I'm very to the point. I'm very direct. I'm very transparent. I don't like dealing with time wasters. So I don't like to deal with time wasters. I have a really amazing coach that teaches me to get to the bottom of the motivation when you're initially speaking to a buyer or seller and determine if they're actually a real buyer or seller. So I try to use that every day. And if I don't feel that it's going to be a match, or I don't feel that they're actually really buying now, or they're really motivated, then I have a team of buyers agents and or listing agents that I could direct them to and let them, decide if they want to work with that person or not. So I think the buyer, the client that I deal with, is the one that knows what they want and when they want it.
Clients that know what they want and when they want it. I love that. All right. So what's your superpower?
I think my superpower, if I had to pick one thing, because I think I have a couple superpowers, but my one superpower would be that I'm honest. I'm brutally honest, and it's a gift and a curse at times. Sometimes I'm able to use it to my benefit, but sometimes it deters me. Right? Like if I'm doing a walkthrough, I'll give you an example of both. I'll give you an example of how it hurts me. If I'm doing a walkthrough for inspection with a buyer, and certain things pop up on the inspection that I have the experience of knowing can be trouble down the line that another agent doesn't, then I'm going to be honest and tell them, hey, listen, I know they're saying that your boiler will give you another 5 years, but I'd get a second opinion on that. And it's hurt me because sometimes the deal hasn't moved forward to the next step and I've lost out on commissions. But the flip side of that coin is that client will then trust me and know that I'm not there just to make a dollar, but I'm there to build a relationship. So that one quality, my honesty, can be a gift and a curse, but I think ultimately it's a superpower because a lot of people aren't that honest, and they'll just go with what they hear.
100%, 100%. And again, it's that time on task, that knowledge, that background that you've got, third generation around real estate, being in the business for as long as you have, that's gotten you to a level of just creating an environment for your clients to ask more questions or dig deeper.
Yeah.
I love that.
I'd like to add one more thing as far as like a superpower that I think that is very important, is that I just won't quit. I refuse to quit.
You cannot hold down the individual that just refuses to give up, right? You just can't. They'll always win.
I won't quit because failure is not an option to me. Like if I don't win, I learn and I move on to the next step. There's no option. Like I'm not gonna go and work at I'm not gonna go work for somebody. I can't. There's no possible way. Like it is not going to happen. So this has to work. And I
Make it
refuse.
work.
Yeah.
I love it. Failure is not an option. That is a common thread with a lot of my clients now that you're saying that out loud. Next question for you, Steven. You're doing great, by the way.
Thank you.
Whose TED Talk would you pay $5,000 to attend?
Who's TED? That's a good question. Somebody that's alive right now, or are we like imaginary hypothetical sort of situation?
Anybody.
If I had to honestly, this is going to sound crazy, but I would love to hear my father do a TED Talk. And I based my life around, my dad passed away in 2009 and I was 27 years old at the time. Ever since that day, that morning when I got the phone call and I learned that he had passed, I've literally dedicated every single day of my life, every fiber in my body to make him proud. And based off of all the things that he taught me in those 27 years, I look at it like, yeah, okay, do I think that I got the short end of the stick, that I only got him for 27 years? Yes, but there were some people who never had their father at all and didn't have a minute of time with them. So I look at it now that I'm blessed that I had him for 27 years. So I would love to hear him give a TED Talk on everything that I talk about, everything you hear me talk about, all the positive stuff that you hear come out of my mouth is all because of him and because of the mindset that he put me in those 27 years. So I'd love to hear my dad give a TED Talk.
That's incredible, because if you think about 27 you were 27 years old. How old? What year was that when you were 27 years old? We're going to do some hard math here, folks. So we're about to learn how old Steve is.
2009.
So 2009, when your dad passed away, mindset and positive thinking and self-help and personal growth, these were not big topics then. I mean, if I think back to that time, there was, I mean, Tony Robbins was giant, right? I mean, literally and figuratively, was giant in that space. Where did your dad?
Brian Tracy was big.
Brian Tracy, okay.
Robert Schuller. I don't know if you know Robert Schuller, the Crystal Cathedral. He was a pastor.
Oh, he's a church guy. Okay.
My dad was Jewish, though. My dad was of Jewish faith, and he found somehow, some way, he found a connection through Robert Schuller, who built the Crystal Cathedral out in Anaheim or in Irving, out in California. And there was something there that led my dad, and it was tough times don't last, but tough people do. And that was on my refrigerator. Legitimately, it was on my refrigerator. There was like a little thing, like it said Robert Schuller, da da da. And you just see these things as a kid, and you don't really like pick up on it until you have to. You don't know that you know how to tie a shoe. You know what I mean? You just tie a shoe. You don't realize all these things that are embedded in you. And that's why I think it's super important for people to remain positive and say positive things around their kids, because they have no idea what the kids are going to pick up. You know, like, and so who was big back then was Brian Tracy was huge for my dad, and Robert Schuller. Another big thing that we always had in my house was an Encyclopedia Britannica. Every year we got the new Encyclopedia Britannica, and that was our Google. Growing up, that was our Google.
Yeah. We're like, we had Collier's Encyclopedia, the entire like bookcase full of them from, I don't know, Lord, 1960 something. And, you know, I would ask my mother something and I would say, you know, how do you spell, you know, supercalifragilisticexpialidocious? She'd say, I don't know, look it up. And I'm like, but if I don't know how to spell it, how am I supposed to look it up? So welcome to the encyclopedia generation, right? That's awesome. That's awesome. So you talk about your dad a lot. Would you say that he was the biggest influence on your life and what caused Steven to show up the way that he is today?
I'd say that I'd say yes, and I'd say yes and no. I'd say yes because he was the patriarch of the family, and he was the one that led the ship, so to say. But like I said earlier, I'm the youngest of three boys. So my two older brothers, Michael and Daniel, they're both in real estate as well. My dad had this dream that we would all be in the business together. So Michael, he put to start a property management company. Daniel became an attorney. Steven was the broker. So the idea was for us to form this sort of family dynamic. So I always tell people that I was blessed because I had three older role models. My brothers have me by 8 years and by 5 years. So there is a bit of a difference.
Wow.
And I was able to see them as older people in my life at all times. We were never peers. So I had the three of them, my father, my older brother Michael, my older brother Daniel, who I always looked up to as role models. So I was able to have three different role models. And I was able to extract all of the good stuff that I saw them doing and discard all the bad stuff. So the three of them are the three biggest influences on my life. Absolutely.
What would you say are your top 3 values? I already heard you say honesty. So let's take honesty as like, we know that's in there. What are your next 3 values?
That I have or that I yearn for?
Either way.
All right.
Your choice.
Okay. So top 3 values. I think that so we talked about honesty already. Honesty and trustworthy kind of go in the same sort of boat. I'd say being hardworking, knowing what you don't know, and having a real sense of self-confidence. I think those are three very important qualities that I always strive to have. You know, when I have my talks at night, before I go to bed, I try my best to say a prayer. And one of the things I always ask for is I say, you know, after I'm done thanking, you know, the God for all the blessings that He's bestowed upon me, I always ask Him to give me the strength, knowledge, ambition, and willpower to be the best version of myself that I could possibly be. So those are kind of some things that I think are important and some values that I think that a person needs to have. And if you lack some of those things, you're really off balance because you're going to make some people really mad that you come across.
Interesting. Okay. What problems do you love to solve?
The impossible problems, the ones that other people can't solve. You know,
You like
I'm
a big
addicted.
messy mess. Give me your
I
biggest
love it.
mess.
I love it because you can kind of just like, you know, go back to Gary Keller and KW, and it's like, okay, this is the big, big, big mess, but it all starts at one domino and one thing that, okay, all right, cool. This is a big problem we have over here, but it all stems from this one thing. So what's the first domino that we could tip over today? You filed bankruptcy recently. You've done this. You've done that. You have no money. You have bad credit. You have that. I can't buy a house. I can't do this. All right, well, cool. What can we do today that can get us going in the right direction? And there's, just like you mentioned before, time over task. Like as long as you stay with it and you can figure out how to solve the problem and you focus on what you can control today, I think that that's extremely important, and it gives you that motivation, the snowball effect of like, okay, all right, now, okay, I see one thing coming off my credit report, another thing coming off my credit report. Oh, my score just went up 20 points today. Like, you know, those are little wins that lead to the big results. And that's just like simple stuff when it talks about like buying a home or whatever. But there's like, you can talk about it in any sort of realm when it comes to real estate, right? Like the property's over leveraged, this, that, you're going to lose it to the bank. Like all of these sort of problems, I enjoy trying my best to whittle it down to what can I control and what can I do today and how can we move forward.
I love that. Tell me, where will you be in 5 years?
5 years from now, my plan is to be living half the year in New York, the other half of the year, the cold months, in a warmer climate. Call it one of the like the Caribbean somewhere or something. I'll be living there. I'm still going to be running a team. I'll probably be doing some local real estate there as well, helping people buy and sell houses. Running a team where I am easily bringing in, you know, at least $250,000 a year worth of GCI. Um, I think that that's the picture for me. At that point, I also have other goals in terms of like my wealth and where I want to be as far as net income and so on and so forth. But that's the gist of it. Like I don't want to live in New York City. I love New York City. It will always be my base, but I don't want to spend the cold months here. I want to be able to wake up and look at a beach or something very warm, and I can enjoy it and I can enjoy my time. I don't want to
You know
spend
my
my
philosophy. Any day with a palm tree is a good day, right?
yeah,
That's my
yeah,
philosophy.
yeah,
Maybe you'll be
exactly.
my neighbor.
So that's my plan. My plan is to grow this thing, to grow this team out that I've just started this year to a point where I have, you know, the picture perfect model of getting to the seventh level that Gary talks about in the books. And I have the buyer's agent, the seller's agents, the listing, you know, the whole 9 yards. That's my goal.
Okay.
And I think
All right.
5 years is a good time.
Gary says you can be anywhere you want to be in 5 years. Jen Davis actually shared her story with us recently and said, 5 years ago, I was a buyer's agent on a team, and today I'm the vice president of MAPS coaching.
There you go.
Right?
There you go.
Okay. So this is my last question for you. And I really want you to think about this because I want you to go to a time where maybe it's mega camp. And I say, I really need you to do me a favor. I have a microphone in one hand, and with the other one, I'm pointing at a stage. The room is full. Maybe it's a breakout session. There's about 1,000 people in the room. I'm going to hand you that microphone and you've got an hour. What are you teaching the people in the room?
I'm going to teach them about the value of relationships with their database and relationships with their sphere of influence, and how to provide value even when you don't think you're providing value. That's a simple question for me. For me, it's all about providing value to people. And if you can't if you can't figure out, I tell everybody when you're getting on a phone, because as you know, I started doing productivity coaching, and I tell everybody before you pick up the phone to call somebody, think about two things. Number one, how can you provide value? And number two, what is the goal of the phone call? The goal should always be to provide value in some way, because then they won't hang up on you. Then they won't be so quick to brush you off the phone. If you're calling up with the same BS that every other agent is calling them up saying, then you're not going to be able to provide value. And then take it a step further. Once you actually have the relationship with people, you have to be able to communicate to them like we're taught in a manner of 36 touch plan. But beyond the 36 touch plan, go out of your way to respond to them. Think of ways to reach out to them on their birthday. Think of ways, you know what I tell people sometimes? I say, listen, if you want to take it even a step further, forget about your clients' birthdays. Learn who the people who are closest to them's birthdays are. If they have 3 kids and you see, oh, it's little James's birthday today, make a mental note. Next year, send something for James's birthday. If they're a dog parent and their dog's birthday and they're posting that, go that extra mile and really think about the relationship that you want to have with that person. And you want to have, when they play word association and somebody says real estate, they say Steven. So I spend my hour talking about it's really branding yourself and really providing value to your database.
I just heard you say so many things that we all know. We've heard them said 100 times. Yet there's the big gap between the knowing what to do and the actual doing it. How do you do that in your business?
I struggle with it every single day. As you know, I struggle with it every single day but I try my best to keep a core sense of items that have to get done. Like I have to make sure I do that. At the very least, I'm doing the birthdays and I'm sending out birthday cards. I have to make sure I'm doing at least 2 or 3 big events where I'm focused on the database. I have to make sure that I'm calling people at least, the quarterly phone calls. So I stick to like the small stuff, and then from there, all the other stuff kind of comes along with it. I also have an amazing assistant who helps me, who I'm molding to become my director of ops, and really kind of get her to the point where she takes control of the business and looks at it from the same viewpoint that I do, which is extremely difficult, and I understand that. But I'm constantly pouring into her and trying my best to show her how I view things and why I look at them that way. So that way, when I'm on the beach and she comes up with the same situation, she's able to kind of look at it and say, wait a second, this is not what Steven would do. This is what he would do, and this is how I'm going to handle it.
Awesome. All right. So what question did I not ask you that I should have asked you?
Well, let's see. You asked me about how I started, what brought me to KW. I don't know. I think that you should be asking people when you're interviewing them, what drew them to this interview? Why did you raise your hand to get on an interview? What is it about content?
That's an amazing question. Adding it to my lineup of questions. All right. So what drew you to respond and be the first guy, by the way, to raise his hand and stick his neck out and say, heck yeah, tell me.
I think it's because I understand the value of content and marketing. I was listening to a podcast the other day, or a webinar, one of the two, and they were talking about marketing without content is like having a bow and arrow, but without any arrows. So the content will allow you to take your marketing to the next level. If you don't have content, then it's really hard to market, because what are you going to do? Slap your name on the back of a bus? You're going to pay all this ridiculous amounts of money to get your name out there. When you have the content, which I'm hoping that you will provide me with a copy of this interview so I can put it out on my platforms, it will give people more insight into who I am. And I think that that's definitely why I raised my hand, because I understand the importance of content in business and how to leverage the 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or hundreds of views that you can get on a video like this, and it lead to more business. So that's something that
exactly the purpose that I did this for. A is because I want to have an easy way for clients of mine to connect with other clients of mine. So creating a library of resource for them to reach out and find out more about each other, get to know, kind of like a not so speedy speed dating type of scenario, where I've learned some things about you today that I didn't know. And we've been working together for a couple of years. So thank you for sharing all of that, giving me new insights into where you have come from and why you raised your hand for this. Yes, I will give you a copy of this. And we're going to talk a little bit in calls moving forward about what do we do with content like this. What are all the ways we can utilize it to connect with other people, to deepen relationships, to make people who aren't aware of us more aware of us, right? To reach the people that we don't, go deeper with the database and wider with the world at large, so that more people reach out to you. And speaking of reaching out to you, Steve, how do people reach out to you? Give us your contact info, so that anybody that's listening that says, you know what, I need to do a better job with. I would love to hear Steve talk more about something that was mentioned here today. Give me your contact information. How do we get in touch with you?
So so the easiest way is probably phone call, right? So my number is 917-562-8347. Text is always preferred over phone calls these days. My dad would be rolling over in his grave to hear that, but text is the best way. I would also say check out my website, which is www.smprealty.com. And on Instagram, it's at Steve_Pad.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for being the first guy. And I'm looking forward to seeing what all we do with all of this great content. And I'll be seeing you soon on a coaching call.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right. My pleasure.